My name is Rachel Whitmore. I have lived in Charleston, South Carolina for nearly a decade, though lately it feels as if I am a visitor in my own life. Our house, a weathered but proud shade of blue with white trim around the windows, sits at the edge of the city where the marsh meets the backyards and the world grows quiet after dusk. When Evan and I first found it, it looked out over untamed grass and wild sunflowers. I remember how we laughed as we painted the porch railing together, his knuckles stained navy for a week, our shoes discarded on the steps as we dreamed about what we might build together. Back then, the place felt alive with possibility, filled with the comfort of shared dreams and unspoken hope. I work as an illustrator and most days find me in my small attic studio at the top of the house. My desk faces a slanted window and I used to love watching the changing light as I painted scenes of animals and children, trees bending in the wind, and the quiet magic of ordinary life. My career was never glamorous, but it was steady enough: greeting cards, commissions for children's books, the occasional magazine cover. Sometimes I wonder if my work looks different now, if the colors are dimmer, if my lines are heavier. There is an ache inside me that never quite leaves. A silent companion that settles into every corner of my day. It has been 3 months since I lost the baby. I remember every moment of that morning, the sudden pain, the way the world tilted. The frantic drive to the hospital with Evan's hand gripping mine so tightly. I could barely feel my fingers. Later, I lay beneath the fluorescent lights, empty and numb. The nurse speaking gently as she explained what had happened, as if it were a technicality. This routine tragedy required a list of instructions and a signature. Evan stayed with me the whole night, holding me in silence. His arms wrapped around me like a shield against a world I no longer recognized. Afterward, it felt as though life split into two pieces: the before, which I remember in colors and laughter, and the after, which is pale and silent. My mother, Diane, never spoke about the loss. She called me once, the day I returned from the hospital, but her words were distant and practical, asking about insurance and paperwork, as if I had merely lost my wallet instead of my child. My sister, Hannah, sent a single text message with a row of heart emojis, then never brought it up again. I have replayed those conversations in my mind so many times, wondering if I missed some hidden warmth, some buried compassion, but all I find is emptiness. The hardest part is the silence. My family treats my grief as if it is an embarrassment, something best ignored or swept beneath the rug. At gatherings, no one asks how I am feeling. My loss is the invisible elephant in the room, pressing down on me until I can barely breathe. It is as if they believe that if they never mention it, I will somehow forget and everything will return to normal. But nothing is normal and I am not the same. Evan has been my anchor through it all. He is the only one who truly listens, who does not flinch when I cry without warning or grow quiet for days on end. He brings home fresh flowers every Friday, a ritual he started the week I came home from the hospital. At first, I thought it was just a gesture, but over time, it became a lifeline. A gentle reminder that there is still beauty to be found in the world. Sometimes, he sits beside me in the studio, reading or working on his laptop while I paint. We do not always speak, but I feel his presence like sunlight on my back. I do not know how I would have survived these months without him. There is another voice in my life that keeps me afloat: my Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister. She lives in Boston, a city I have only visited twice, but she calls me every Sunday without fail. Margaret is everything my mother is not: warm, honest, unafraid of difficult truths. She lost a child once, too, many years ago, and I think she recognizes the shape of my grief. She always says the right thing, reminding me that healing takes time, that I am not alone even when I feel most abandoned. Some days, I let her words wash over me, clinging to the comfort she offers through the phone. Despite these small comforts, time seems to have lost all meaning. Days blur together, each one much like the last. I find myself scrolling through social media, watching as friends and acquaintances post pictures of baby showers, ultrasound photos, and plump, healthy newborns. Each image is a reminder of what I lost. I want to be happy for them, but the bitterness rises in my throat, and I shut my phone off, feeling ashamed of my jealousy. The worst is watching Hannah's pregnancy unfold from a distance. She is 5 years younger than I am, always the favorite, always effortlessly charming. She and her husband, Mark, live just across town in a newly renovated townhouse. My mother talks about her constantly, gushing over every detail of the nursery, every craving and kick. It is as if Hannah's pregnancy is a second chance for the family, a way to erase the stain of my failure. I sent Hannah a card for her birthday, along with a small plush bear I sewed myself, stuffing it with lavender and soft cotton. She never mentioned receiving it. I wonder if she even opened the box. Money has been tight since the miscarriage. We had some savings, just over $2,000 set aside for the baby, enough, we thought, to cover cribs and diapers, maybe a few weeks off work. Instead, most of it vanished in a blur of hospital bills, prescriptions, and follow-up appointments. Insurance covered some, but not enough. I found myself making lists late at night, tallying expenses and wondering how we would manage. Evan insists that we'll get by. He picks up extra freelance work, late hours spent hunched over his computer, but I see the worry in his eyes when he thinks I am not looking. Sometimes I wander through the empty nursery at the back of the house. We painted the walls a soft, hopeful green. The crib stands assembled, sheets neatly tucked, stuffed animals lined up along the side. I cannot bring myself to take anything down. The room smells faintly of cedar and new paint. It is both a memorial and a wound that never quite heals. Our friends try to help in their awkward ways. They invite us to dinners and send texts checking in, but I rarely respond. Social gatherings exhaust me, the cheerful small talk a reminder of everything I am supposed to be feeling but cannot. At first, I tried to pretend, to smile and laugh, but it felt false, as if I was performing someone else's happiness. Now, I let the invitations pile up unanswered. My world has grown very small. One night, as I lay in bed listening to the rain against the window, Evan slipped under the covers and wrapped his arms around me. He whispered, "We'll get through this, Rachel." I promise. I wanted to believe him. But the promise felt as fragile as the petals of the lilies on my bedside table. Still, his presence was steady, a quiet assurance in the darkness. Work has become both a refuge and a torment. Some days, I lose myself in my illustrations, the gentle flow of watercolor across paper, the slow emergence of shapes and stories. I take on as many commissions as I can, desperate to fill my days with purpose. But other days, I stare at blank pages, paralyzed by doubt, convinced that I have nothing left to offer. My editor, Karen, is patient, extending deadlines and sending encouraging emails, but I can feel her frustration growing. I have started walking in the evenings, tracing the edges of our neighborhood as the sun slips below the horizon. Charleston is beautiful in the twilight, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and salt from the marsh. Sometimes I pass neighbors pushing strollers or jogging with dogs, their lives unfolding in easy rhythms. I wonder if they can sense my sorrow, if it marks me as I move among them. There are moments, brief and fleeting, when I feel almost normal. Sitting on the porch with Evan, sharing a pot of coffee as the city wakes. Listening to Margaret's voice on the phone, her laughter was warm and bright. Watching the marsh grass sway in the wind, a promise that the world continues, even when I cannot. I hold on to these moments, tucking them away like treasures. My mother continues to call, though less frequently now. Her conversations are always focused on Hannah, her health, her cravings, the endless baby preparations. If she asks about me, it is only in passing. Once, I tried to bring up my loss, but she changed the subject, launching into a story about Hannah's latest ultrasound. I hung up the phone and cried until I was empty. I feel invisible in my own family. My grief is an inconvenience, a shadow they would rather ignore. I wish I could make them understand, but the words never come. Instead, I pour my sorrow into my art, hoping that, somehow, it will find its way to someone who understands. As autumn settles over Charleston, the air grows cooler and the days shorten. I light candles in the evenings, filling the house with a soft, golden glow. Evan and I talk quietly about the future, about what might come next. The pain is still there, but it has softened at the edges, no longer as sharp, no longer as consuming. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if my family will ever see me, truly see me, beyond their expectations and disappointments. But in the stillness of the studio, with Evan by my side and Margaret's voice on the phone, I find the strength to keep going. I am learning, slowly, to carry my grief without letting it define me. For now, that is enough. A week after the leaves in Charleston began turning, I received the invitation I'd been dreading. It arrived in the mail, tucked inside an envelope sealed with a pink sticker that read, "Oh, baby." The card itself was beautiful, adorned with watercolor peonies and gold script. The kind of design I might have illustrated myself in better times. Hannah's baby shower. I stared at the invitation, my fingers trembling as I traced the delicate flowers, my stomach twisting with something sharp and sour. The world outside my window was washed in the gentle glow of late autumn, but inside, the walls felt like they were closing in. The phone rang that evening just after sunset. I recognized my mother's number immediately, that familiar combination of dread and duty tightening in my chest before I even answered. Diane's voice was crisp and businesslike, as if she were finalizing a dinner reservation instead of coercing her daughter into a room full of reminders of everything she'd lost. "Rachel, you got the invitation, I assume," she began, no greeting, no warmth. I sat at the kitchen table, Evan across from me, quietly sketching in his notebook. "Yes, I got it," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But she cut me off before I could say anything more. "Good. Hannah wants you there. The family needs to show up, especially now. She needs her sister's support." My mother's words were laced with a pressure I recognized from childhood, a silent threat beneath every sentence. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Did she even remember what I'd been through? The hospital visits, the empty nursery, the endless waves of grief that still caught me off guard and left me breathless. It was as if my pain was invisible, erased by Hannah's glowing pregnancy, overshadowed by her swelling belly and the promise of new life. "Mom, I don't know if I'm ready," I said quietly, my voice almost lost in the hush of our small kitchen. She sighed, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times. "Rachel, don't make this about you. This is Hannah's day. Try to think of someone else for once. And whatever you do, please don't bring up your situation. Just keep it light, okay? It's not the time." The phone went silent as she waited for my answer. I looked at Evan, who was watching me with gentle concern. His presence was my anchor, the only thing keeping me tethered to the moment. "I'll think about it," I said finally, though we both knew I had no real choice. Diane never took no for an answer. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Evan reached out, wrapping his fingers around mine. "You don't have to go, Rach," he said softly, as if he could read my thoughts. But I did. I always did. That night, after Evan had fallen asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through my texts, hoping for some small distraction. That's when a message popped up from Aunt Margaret. "You don't owe anyone your pain, darling. If you go for you, not for them. I'm proud of you no matter what." I read her words over and over, letting them settle over me like a warm blanket. Margaret had always known how to speak to the wounds my mother ignored. When the day of the shower arrived, I spent nearly an hour deciding what to wear. I wanted to disappear, to become invisible in the sea of pastel dresses and smiling faces, but I also wanted to be seen, truly seen, for everything I'd survived. In the end, I chose a simple navy dress, the one I wore to interviews and first dates, paired with a gold necklace Evan gave me for my birthday. I spent extra time on my makeup, trying to paint on a brave face that would withstand tears if they came. I wrapped my gift carefully, a set of watercolor prints I'd painted late at night in my studio. Forest animals in gentle hues, a little fox curled beneath a tree, a mother owl and her chick nestled together. I wondered if Hannah would notice the love I'd poured into every stroke, or if she would toss them aside, just another package among the pile. The shower was held in a rented hall downtown, a bright, echoing space filled with balloons and flowers and the scent of sugary cake. When I arrived, I paused outside the door, taking a long, shaky breath. Evan squeezed my hand before letting go. "Call me if you need anything. I'll be here in 10 minutes flat." Inside, the air was thick with laughter and chatter. Hannah sat at the center of a circle of women, her belly rounded beneath a pink floral dress, cheeks flushed with excitement. She glanced up as I entered, her smile tight and brief before she turned away, accepting congratulations and hugs from friends and family. Diane hovered near the buffet table, orchestrating every detail, her smile never reaching her eyes. I tried to blend in, greeting aunts and cousins, letting the tide of conversation carry me from one cluster of guests to another. Everywhere I turned, people talked about cribs and strollers, nursery colors and baby names. No one asked how I was doing. It was as if I were a ghost, haunting the edges of their happiness. I set my gift on the table, arranging it carefully among the others. Hannah barely glanced at me as she opened it, murmuring a thank you before moving on to the next box. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to smile, holding my breath as the room swirled around me. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself drifting toward the windows, needing space, needing air. I watched the city outside, the slow movement of cars along the street, people with lives and worries entirely separate from mine. For a moment, I let myself imagine walking away, disappearing into the Charleston sunlight and never looking back. But I stayed, because leaving would have meant another call from my mother, another round of accusations and guilt. I stayed, even as every moment felt like a fresh wound. Finally, the cake was brought out, a towering confection covered in pink roses and tiny gold shoes. Diane clinked her glass, calling everyone to attention. "I just want to say how grateful I am that we can all be together to celebrate this new life," she began, her voice ringing out over the room. "It's a miracle, truly. Family is everything, and I couldn't be prouder of my daughters." My skin prickled at her words. The room felt suddenly smaller, the lights too bright. I could feel all the eyes on Hannah, on my mother, on me. Diane raised her glass higher. "To Hannah and the beautiful baby girl on the way. May she bring all of us joy and remind us of the miracle of new beginnings." I felt a coldness settle over me. I wanted to slip out, to run, but before I could move, Diane was at my side, her grip tight on my arm. "Don't ruin this, Rachel," she whispered, her voice sharp as glass. "You always have to make everything about yourself. Just once, let someone else have the spotlight." Something inside me snapped. I turned to her, years of silence and pain bubbling to the surface. My voice shook, but I didn't care who heard. "I lost my baby, Mom," I said, my words barely more than a whisper, but loud enough for the people nearest to hear. "You never once asked if I was okay. You never once cared how I was feeling. I needed you, and you weren't there." A hush fell over the room. Hannah looked up, eyes wide and brimming with tears. Someone set down their cup with a soft clink. Diane's face twisted with anger, her mask slipping for just a moment. "Oh, here we go again," she spat. "Always the victim, Rachel. Always needing attention. Can't you let your sister have her day?" "I just wanted my family to care," I said, my voice breaking. "I just wanted someone to notice that I was hurting." Diane's hand shot out, her palm connecting with my cheek in a sharp, shocking slap that echoed across the room. For a second, the world froze. My face burned, tears springing to my eyes, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation the years of being silenced made real in a single, violent gesture. Evan was there in an instant, pushing through the crowd to reach me. His arms pulling me close as I sobbed against his chest. I could hear voices rising. Someone shouting. Someone else calling for calm in the blur. I saw my Aunt Margaret, her face stricken as she rushed toward me. Someone must have called the police, because moments later, officers entered the hall. Their presence sobering the chaos, Diane tried to explain, her voice trembling with outrage. But no one listened. Hannah sobbed in the corner, surrounded by friends. I felt numb, drained, as if my body were floating outside of itself. Evan led me outside, wrapping his coat around my shoulders, shielding me from the stares and whispers as we stepped into the fading light. I could hear the sirens in the distance, the low murmur of voices behind closed doors. The world felt both impossibly large and unbearably small. We drove home in silence, the city passing in blurs of gold and blue. My cheek still stung, but the pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. Evan held my hand as we pulled into our driveway, the porch light glowing like a promise in the gathering dark. Inside, the house felt safe again, a sanctuary from the storm I'd just survived. I curled up on the couch, Evan beside me, the weight of the day pressing down. Margaret called, her voice trembling with worry and love. "I'm here for you, Rachel," she whispered. "You are not alone." For the first time in a long while, I let myself believe her. After the baby shower, my world unraveled in slow motion. It was as if I were watching my own life from a distance, behind a pane of glass I could not break. The slap still echoed in my mind, a sharp sting not just on my cheek but deep in my heart. And the memories of that day replayed on a loop, the anger in my mother's voice, the tears in Hannah's eyes, Evan's arms holding me steady while the rest of the family looked away. I had always known there was a chasm between me and the people who raised me, but I never imagined it could grow so wide or so cold. The next morning, I woke up with a dull ache on the side of my face and an even deeper ache in my chest. Evan didn't hesitate. He brewed a pot of coffee, called his friend who worked in family law, and by noon, we had begun the process of filing a restraining order against my mother. The very idea of it made my stomach twist. I didn't want to believe I needed protection from my own family, but after what happened at the shower, neither of us was willing to take chances. Evan sat beside me as I filled out the paperwork, his hand on mine, steadying my shaking fingers. I wrote every detail as clearly as I could remember, the words, the slap, the threats, the years of silence and disappointment that came before. By the time I signed my name at the bottom, my hands ached and my head throbbed. But a strange sense of relief had settled over me. For the first time in years, I had drawn a line that could not be crossed. Word traveled fast. Within hours, Aunt Margaret called from Boston. I could hear the panic in her voice, the heartbreak that she couldn't be with me immediately. She insisted on flying down as soon as possible, and true to her word, she arrived that weekend with a suitcase full of homemade biscotti and enough hugs to last a lifetime. Margaret was a bomb, a living contradiction to the cruelty I'd endured from the rest of my family. She bustled through our house, baking bread and simmering pots of soup, her presence filling each room with a sense of home that I hadn't felt in months. Sometimes I'd find her standing in the nursery, her eyes glistening as she touched the crib and the green-painted walls. She never said much about the loss, but she always made sure I ate, always tucked a blanket around my shoulders when I fell asleep on the couch, and always squeezed my hand when the world seemed too heavy to bear. The days after the shower blurred together. I spent hours in my studio, my paints untouched, staring out the attic window at the marshes as the tides ebbed and flowed. Evan worked late, Margaret kept the house running, and I drifted in a haze of exhaustion and sorrow. My phone buzzed constantly, some friends offering quiet support, others fishing for gossip. I ignored most of the messages. Even the few from Hannah went unread. I couldn't bring myself to face her, not after the look in her eyes that day, the fear and guilt swirling beneath her tears. 2 weeks passed in this strange limbo. One afternoon, as the sun slipped behind a curtain of rain clouds, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was Mark's number, and we'd barely spoken in years, except for awkward holiday gatherings and the occasional birthday wish. Something in me, though, knew I had to pick up. My hand shook as I pressed the phone to my ear. Mark's voice was trembling, raw, and uncertain. "Rachel, can we talk?" he asked, his words stumbling out in a rush. "I should have come to you sooner. I should have done something." I don't even know where to start. I closed the studio door and sat at my desk, forcing my breath to slow. Mark, what's going on? Is Hannah okay? He let out a shaky sigh. She's not herself. Not since the shower. And there's something you need to know. I know there's more to what happened with your miscarriage. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I think Diane and Hannah did something. I think they hurt you on purpose. The words didn't make sense at first. My mind recoiled, searching for some other meaning, some misunderstanding. What are you talking about? Mark's voice cracked. I overheard them weeks before you lost the baby. They were talking in the kitchen. Diane said something about a solution and how it was better for everyone if you weren't. He stopped, gathering himself. I thought they were just angry. I never thought they'd do something. But after the baby was born, Hannah started acting strangely paranoid. I found some messages on her phone. And then I remembered you weren't eating at family dinners, you were getting sick, and Diane kept making you tea, kept insisting you drink it. My blood ran cold. Flashes of memory hit me, my mother pressing a steaming mug into my hands, Hannah watching from the corner of the room, my sense of dread that I could never quite explain. What kind of tea? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I took her phone and started reading. There are texts between her and Diane about getting herbs from some shop in Atlanta, about making sure you drank the tea when you visited. There are voice notes, too. They talk about ending your pregnancy, about making sure you didn't ruin Hannah's big year. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. But I've saved everything. I already gave it to the police. For a moment, the room spun. I pressed my forehead against the desk, breathing in the scent of old paper and paint. I wanted to scream, to weep, to rip the world apart for letting this happen. Instead, I listened as Mark described the rest, the bank withdrawals for $100 in cash, receipts from herbal shops specializing in remedies that should never have touched my body. He told me how he brought the evidence to the authorities, how he sat in the police station for hours, hands trembling, as he played the voice notes for a detective. The days that followed were a blur of interviews and statements, court dates and paperwork. Evan held my hand as I told my story again and again, how I'd trusted my family, how I'd felt so alone, how I doubted myself when I got sick, how I'd drunk what my mother gave me, never imagining the possibility that someone who was supposed to love me could be capable of such cruelty. Aunt Margaret sat beside me, her presence unwavering, her face set in a mask of quiet fury. The trial began in early spring. It felt surreal, sitting in the courtroom with Evan and Margaret, watching as Diane and Hannah took their seats at the defense table. My mother looked small and brittle, her face lined with fear and something like shame. Hannah wept through most of the proceedings, but the evidence was overwhelming. The texts, the audio files, the receipts, and the testimony from Mark, who took the stand with shaking hands and tear-filled eyes. The prosecution laid everything bare. They detailed how Diane and Hannah had conspired to end my pregnancy out of jealousy, how they'd watched as my health declined, how they'd continued to serve me tea laced with dangerous herbs. There was no remorse in their messages, only cold calculation and a twisted sense of righteousness. I sat through every minute, clutching Evan's hand until my knuckles ached. I listened to the lawyers dissect my life, my pain, and my family's betrayal. At times, I felt as if I were floating outside my own body, watching some other woman live my nightmares. Other times, the anger burned so hot I could barely keep my seat. But through it all, I refused to look away. I wanted them to see my face, to know that I survived. The verdict came quickly. The jury found both Diane and Hannah guilty of assault and attempted harm, and the judge sentenced them each to several years in prison. There was no dramatic outburst, no last-minute confession, just the cold, heavy finality of justice being served. I expected to feel relief, but what I felt instead was emptiness. A quiet sorrow for what could never be restored. My mother and sister had become strangers, their choices building walls that would never be torn down. Mark was granted custody of his newborn daughter, Lily. I saw him in the courthouse hallway after the verdict. Exhaustion and heartbreak etched into every line of his face. He held Lily in his arms, the tiny girl swaddled in a soft blue blanket, her eyes wide and trusting. We stood together in silence for a long moment, and then he spoke, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. I should have protected you. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure Lily is safe." I wanted to comfort him, to tell him none of this was his fault, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached out and touched Lily's hand, her tiny fingers curling around mine. In that moment, I saw a future, one marked by scars, yes, but also by the possibility of something new. We could not undo what had been done, but we could choose how to move forward, step by uncertain step. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new kind of normal. The house felt quieter, the air lighter. Aunt Margaret stayed for a while, making sure I ate, making sure I slept, making sure I remembered that I was loved. Evan and I talked late into the night, making plans for the future, dreaming of what might come next. Mark brought Lily to visit, and I painted a mural of wildflowers for her nursery, filling the room with color and hope. The truth had come out. Justice had been served. And though the wounds would never fully heal, I learned that sometimes survival is its kind of victory. I never imagined how quiet a house could feel, even when sunlight dances across the floorboards and traffic murmurs just beyond the garden gate. Our blue house on the edge of Charleston, South Carolina, was supposed to be the place where Evan and I built our family, a home filled with laughter, the tap of tiny feet on old wooden stairs, and the gentle chaos of a life in full bloom. Instead, since the miscarriage, our room seemed to echo with a stillness that settles deeper with each passing day. I am Rachel Whitmore. I earned my living as an illustrator, and until recently, my days were a kaleidoscope of watercolor, graphite, and the cheerful energy of children's book commissions. The attic studio is my refuge, a place lined with storyboards and sketches, jars of brushes, and stacks of paper that once seemed to promise only new beginnings. Now, some mornings I stare at blank pages, my hands still, waiting for the ache to pass. But it lingers, persistent and unseen, like a bruise beneath the skin. The pain of losing the baby was not only physical, though that part was searing and unforgettable. It was the silence that followed, suffocating, dense, filling every conversation and family gathering with things left unsaid. I remember every detail of that day. The sun was just rising, gold against our bedroom window. I woke with a pain that grew, a warning I tried to ignore until Evan saw my face and rushed to my side, his voice gentle and panicked as he bundled me into the car. At the hospital, the world shrank to harsh lights and waiting, the cool certainty of the doctor's voice and the finality of his words. There would be no heartbeat. The baby was gone. Evan never left my side. He held me through the tears that felt endless, wrapped me in his arms as though he could shield me from the truth. He brought home lilies and daisies every Friday, his attempt to remind me that life could still offer beauty. Even when money got tight, hospital bills devouring the $2,000 we'd saved for the nursery, he'd find a way to leave something bright and living on the kitchen table. I clung to those small gestures, even as the world around us seemed to forget. My family's response was a shadow of support, not the real thing. My mother, Diane, called exactly once. Her voice was practical, almost clinical, as if we were discussing a minor inconvenience. "You'll try again. These things happen. Focus on Hannah's good news." I held the phone, stunned into silence, wondering how a mother could be so far away while living just 20 minutes across town. My sister Hannah, always my mother's favorite, sent a text, just 3 heart emojis and a gif of a baby. I never replied. I didn't trust myself to say anything I wouldn't regret. Hannah's pregnancy became the new center of family life. Every conversation, every group chat, every family dinner revolved around her swelling belly and the nursery she decorated in pale pinks and creams. My mother gushed about her first grandchild as if my loss had never existed. It was as though I had become a ghost, someone whose sadness made others uncomfortable, best left unmentioned or erased. The only exception was Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister, who called me every Sunday from her apartment in Boston. She'd lost a child herself decades earlier, a grief that colored her voice with understanding. Margaret's love was a balm, a gentle presence on the other end of the phone line, reminding me that I was not alone in my sorrow. She spoke with honesty, never offering false cheer or easy platitudes. "You're not broken, Rachel. Grief changes us, but it doesn't end us. Let yourself rest. The world will still be there when you're ready." In Charleston, autumn arrived with cool mornings and the sweet, heavy scent of magnolia still clinging to the air. I wandered the house at odd hours, unable to sleep. Moving from the nursery with its hopeful green walls and untouched crib to my studio, where the light was softest. Sometimes I tried to paint, starting and abandoning projects after projects. The baby animals I used to love sketching now felt too innocent for the world I inhabited. Evan did his best to keep our life afloat, working late into the night on freelance design jobs and refusing to let the dwindling bank balance worry me. He left small notes on my desk, little reminders that he believed in me, that he still saw the person I'd been before grief settled over us. But even his optimism couldn't keep the sense of isolation at bay. Friends reached out less and less. Invitations to dinner or brunch, always awkward in tone, became easier to decline. "We're thinking of you," people said, but their lives continued at a pace I couldn't match. Some days, I managed to find comfort in routine. I'd make coffee before dawn, sit with Evan in quiet companionship as the city woke up outside. On better days, I'd walk along the river, letting the rhythm of my steps steady my mind. Charleston's beauty is undeniable, with its old oaks and pastel houses, its easy southern charm, but even the loveliest vistas can seem muted through the lens of loss. My mother, meanwhile, grew increasingly insistent about Hannah's baby shower. She called again, her tone brisk and expectant. "You will come to the shower, Rachel. Your sister needs your support." When I hesitated, she grew sharper. Don't make this about you. Hannah deserves to enjoy her pregnancy without anyone dragging her down. Her words stung, but by now I had learned not to argue. I knew what was expected: silence, a smile, a gift that would look good in photographs. I tried to talk to Evan about it, about how the idea of watching Hannah unwrap presents and bask in everyone's joy felt unbearable. He listened, holding my hand, reassuring me that my pain was real, that my feelings were not a burden. He offered to come with me, to be my shield if the day became too much. But part of me didn't want to show weakness, not in front of my mother, not in front of a family that seemed to thrive on denial. Margaret, hearing the story on our weekly call, was furious. You don't owe them anything, Rachel. If you go for yourself, not for them. Your healing comes first. Her voice was so fierce that I almost believed her, almost felt brave enough to stay home and let the world spin without me. But in the end, I agreed to go, more out of habit than hope, determined not to give my mother another reason to call me selfish. I threw myself into preparing a gift for Hannah. Late at night, I painted a set of gentle woodland scenes: a fox curled beneath a tree, a pair of rabbits in a spring meadow, an owl watching over her chick. Each brushstroke was a tiny act of defiance, a reminder to myself that I could still create beauty, even if my own story felt broken. The day of the shower arrived with brittle sunlight and a sense of dread that settled between my ribs. I wore a navy dress, something simple and safe, and let Evan drive me downtown to the rented hall. He squeezed my hand before I went in, his eyes full of worry and tenderness. I'll be close, he promised. Call me if you need to leave. You don't have to stay a minute longer than you want. Inside, the hall was a riot of pink and gold. Balloons floated above the tables, gifts spilled across the stage, and everywhere, people were laughing, already tipsy on sweet punch and the excitement of new life. Hannah was radiant, her smile wide and easy as she made her way from group to group, soaking up the attention. My mother ran the show, directing guests and fixing decorations, her gaze cool whenever it landed on me. I tried to make myself invisible, hovering at the edge of conversations, slipping my gift onto the pile with trembling hands. When Hannah opened it, she barely glanced at the paintings before thanking me and moving on to the next box. My cheeks burned, but I smiled, pretending not to notice. Every comment about motherhood, every congratulations and toast felt like another twist of the knife. Midway through the afternoon, Diane made her way over, her expression unreadable. Remember, Rachel, she whispered, don't bring up the past. Let's keep today happy for everyone. I nodded, swallowing the urge to scream. I had never felt more alone. The rest of the day passed in a haze of forced cheer and exhaustion. By the time Evan picked me up, I was trembling with relief, desperate to leave the noise and the forced happiness behind. At home, I let myself cry in his arms, letting the pain and anger pour out in great, shuddering sobs. He held me until the tears subsided, then brewed me a cup of tea and led me upstairs where the house was quiet and safe. That night, as I sat at my studio window watching the lights of Charleston flicker in the distance, I realized that healing wouldn't come from my family's approval, or from pretending to be happy when I wasn't. It would come, slowly, from the love I let into my life, Evan's steady presence, Margaret's fierce loyalty, and the small, persistent hope that one day, the rooms of our blue house would feel full again. For the first time in a long while, I let myself imagine that future, and in that hope, I found the faintest outline of peace.